morning, everyone, from me. Are you ready to make Fair by Design learning materials? I hope you are, and I hope you will have fun in the next 2.5 hours or so. So we will be talking about the Fair by Design methodology. What we are going to try to do in the next 2 hours is for me to try and pass you on my knowledge in making Fair by Design learning materials, what they are, how you can create them, why are they so important, why you need to think about this every time you make learning materials, and how to use the Fair by Design methodology to do it. Inside the Fair by Design methodology, you will see later there are a few stages that help you through this process of making Fair by Design materials. So I will tell you a little bit about every stage, what's important in the stage, what's optional, what's mandatory if you really want to have something fair in the end. The way this training is going to go, it will not be one-way street, okay? I need your help in order to make it good and to make sure that you are involved. So please try to connect to the Particify room using the QR code you see here or the link that Amelia is pasting in the chat, I hope. Open it up on your phone or on your browser, on your computer, or whatever. It doesn't make any difference. From time to time, I will be asking you a question related to the Fair by Design methodology for making fair learning materials, just to see what you think about it, to get you into the right mood of different challenges and things you need to think about when you are trying to actually implement this methodology into practice. I hope you are connecting to the room and you have the link. So I'll give you like half a minute to just connect. I see other people also entering the room, so they might need the QR code. And then we'll start for real. Don't worry, it's anonymous. I don't know who is answering what or whatever. Also in the Participate room, while you're in there, you will see that there is a place for Q&As. So at any point in time, you can write a question in there. My colleague will be monitoring the questions. If it is something burning, he will tell me right away to address it. If not, we'll address it in the end in the Q&A session. And there is also a part where you can provide live feedback, whether you like the training or you don't like it. How do you feel during the training? You can use all of these options while we are here and doing the training. Okay, I don't see any new people entering the room in Zoom. I hope most of you connected. If someone didn't connect, we'll paste the link to the room again. So let's start. When we talk about Fair by Design methodology, first the question is why? Of course, in order to produce fair learning materials. What is it about fair learning materials that makes them so great and the right way to produce learning materials? Well, because when you make them fair, you make them actually easier to find, easier to access, easier to reuse by other people. So basically, if you want to learn more about something, it should be fairly easy to find it on Google or other types of search engines. If you're an instructor and you would like to create new learning materials, of course, the first step would be, let's see if there is something out there that I can reuse or at least use it to inspire me. And to make sure that all of this is going to work fine, everything needs to be interoperable in a sense that it uses file formats and software that are easy to find, easy to use, easy to combine together so that everything can work as it should be. In this way, by creating fair learning materials, we are actually supporting a global learning community so that we can share stuff together, we can improve it, creating a community that works on the same types of learning materials, keeps them up to date, and makes them compatible to the target audience and also to the context of the learning itself. When we say fair, in the Fair by Design methodology, one of the most important things for you to remember is that it should be fair for all. And when under all, we mean on one side, the learners, so the ones that are using the learning materials in order to gain knowledge from them. On the other side, the instructors, the people that are developing new learning materials. So it should be fair for both. That means that from the point of view of learners, it should be easy to find learning materials to learn from, easy to access, to understand how I can use this easy to use it with using common tools like just a browser or a viewer or something, and then reusable in a sense that I can come back after 1 week, after 1 month, after 1 year, go through the same material and refresh my knowledge. From the instructor point of view, when we say fair, means that I want to create new learning materials, so it should be easy for me to find existing materials on the same topic, access the editable version because I would like to reuse them, but it should be easy to reuse, right? If I just access a PDF document, it will not be so easy to reproduce the content. Fully understand the context and reuse it, of course, according to the licensing terms, if I am allowed to reuse it in the first place. So this is what we want, both of these things to be true when we produce fair by design learning materials. And of course, to make sure that these materials are going to provide this for the other people, it requires a bit additional commitment. So if you want to create fair learning materials, let's be fair, it will take you a little bit more time than just creating learning materials that are not fair. But of course, the benefits are there in order to incentivize you to make this effort and do it. When I say make this effort, one of the things that you need to do is learn about new stuff that you haven't used before. For example, a metadata schema that describes the learning material. Make sure you understand the licensing, what you can and what you cannot reuse, what kind of license you should provide for your learning materials to make them reusable for others. Why fair by design? Because it's easier when you think about fair from the beginning. If you already have learning materials which are not fair, in order to make them fair, it might even require more time than if you started from the beginning and you followed the fair by design methodology. And of course, there are different levels of fair, and we will talk about this through the methodology. The methodology is made in such a way that everything that can help to make the materials more fair, you should be able to do it in one of the stages. But there is minimum things in order to say this is fair according to the FAIR principles, and then extra stuff that make them even more reusable, more user-friendly, more accessible, more interoperable, and so on. We always strive for the highest FAIR that we can achieve. And that's the whole purpose of the methodology. So let's try and see if Particify works for you. This is my first question for you. So let's see what you understand under fair learning materials. So the question is, which of the following best describes the essential characteristics of the learning materials designed according to the FAIR principles? You should now go to the Participate page, choose your answer, click Submit, and I will be viewing the results to see if we are thinking the same when we say FAIR learning materials. Okay, cool. I see with most of you, I'm on the same page. Materials are assigned unique persistent identifiers, accompanied by rich machine-readable metadata, compatible with diverse educational platforms, and licensed to allow for adaptations and reuse. This is what we mean under FAIR. And basically, if you ask the FAIR by design methodology, what is the minimum FAIR? This is the minimum FAIR. Okay, if this is the minimum things you need to do while using the FAIR by design methodology in order to get fair learning materials. If you're missing something of this, then your materials in the end are not going to be fair. This is the minimum in the sense that you can do a lot more, and we are going to talk about doing a lot more to make them more fair, but this is something that is essential, okay? You can't just skip some of these things. To make it findable, you need to describe the learning materials using metadata. The best way would be to provide human and machine readable, at least one of these two would be minimum. and index it in a resource using a persistent identifier. To make it accessible, the original FAIR principles ask for defining access rules, authentication, and authorization of how you can use the learning materials in the FAIR by design methodology. Because we are working with learning materials, we added one more thing, and this is accessibility of the learning materials from the point of view of the target audience, right? To be accessible by the wide audience, wide range of people that are using the learning materials. Truly accessible in a way. For interoperable, use a metadata schema. We are recommending the RDA minimum metadata schema because this is specifically made for learning materials, but you can use another one, domain-specific one if you want. And make sure that the resource is available in open file format so that people can open them with common tools. And reusable means clear attribution of everything that reused, provided that their licenses are permissible, provided that they allow reusing, and provide permissible license for your learning materials in such a way that it allows derivations. That means that other people can take your learning materials, make changes to them, and adapt them to their context. So this is what we want to achieve as minimum. Everything additional in the methodology will just make stuff even more fair, which is even more better in the end to provide the open education that we are striving for. So in order to get the FAIR learning materials, this is what we came up with. This is the FAIR by design methodology in a nutshell. What we did is we took the backward instructional design process. This is one of the most popular processes for developing learning materials. And we added the FAIR principles inside. So think about it as an instructional design process with FAIR principles as steroids added to it. The idea is to achieve a result that is fair for both learners and peer instructors. We divided this process into 6 stages: prepare, discover, design, produce, publish, and verify. And as you see, we continuously improve the learning materials by moving in a circle around these stages. Every circle is a new version of the learning materials. So what we are going to do in this training is we are going to go through each of these stages, and we are going to talk about what are the things that you are supposed to be doing and thinking about if you want to achieve maximum fairness of your learning materials. So we will cover the minimum, but we will also talk about every extra thing that you can do in order to make it even more fair and even more reusable by others. So let's start first with prepare. The idea of prepare is first to learn new skills in order to make sure that you know how to design fair learning materials, and then start thinking about the learning materials that you want to create, define the initial things that you need to define for the learning materials. So basically in prepare, if you don't know anything about FAIR, it's time to learn, right? So you learn about the FAIR principles, you learn how to deal with intellectual property rights, you need to learn about the metadata schema that you're going to use, whether it's going to be the RDA minimum or something else. The idea, as we said, of the FAIR by design methodology is to define fair learning objects. And when we say fair learning objects, that means that the minimum that is going to be the output of the fair learning by design methodology is a package that describes a learning resource that has at least one learning outcome, at least one lesson plan, the content of the lesson, description of an activity, if there is activity inside, the way you can assess people if they actually understand the learning content, and facilitation guide that describes to other people how to reuse this content and how to put it into their own context. So every time you use the FAIR by design methodology, you will be creating these kind of packages. The packages can be big, can be small, can be divided into sub pieces or anything. It works. It doesn't matter on the size of the learning object. It will work every time. It's just up to you to make sure that you structure it properly in order to make it as reusable as possible. And now we start the backward instructional design process. According to the backward instructional design process, the first thing that you need to do is focus on the learning objectives, what you want to achieve. And then you think about how to get there by envisioning the assessment. How are you going to assess people that they actually learned what you want them to learn? Then how to actually prepare and structure the content to get where you want them to be. According to the backward instructional design process, the first things that you need to define about a new learning material is define its purpose, its target audience, any prerequisites, because it might be an advanced course on something, so it depends on something else from before. The scope. Once you have this, the next step is to formulate the initial version of your learning objectives. What do you expect people to know at the end of this learning experience? For this, we are going to use definitions of learning objectives in a smart way using the Bloom's taxonomy. Let's go into a bit more details about every one of these steps. First, we said you need to learn about the metadata schema. What we recommend is using the RDA minimum metadata schema because it's specifically designed for learning resources. And what you see here on the screen are actually the fields, the values that you need to provide in order to describe your learning resource. And most of them you're going to do anyhow, like title, abstract or description, the authors, the language, the keywords, and stuff like that. Note some of the fields, such as version dates, that actually tells you if this is a newer or older version of the learning material. License that should be permissible and allow derivations. What is the target group that you're targeting in this process? Is there any access cost? What are the learning outcomes that you're trying to achieve? So you see, when you actually provide information for all of these fields, you create the concept of your learning materials, and you manage to describe it in such a way that it will be easily findable by different engines. When you develop the metadata, it's not all done in the first step. Okay, of course, you cannot expect that you will be able to fill out all of these fields right away, right? So in the prepare stage, you draft the basic metadata information. So we need the title, the authors, the keywords, the audience, the expertise level. Then in the design stage, you add most of the information to the metadata and you create what we call a syllabus. This is basically what the description of the learning resource that is available for view to everyone, as the metadata should be open and available for view to everyone. Doesn't matter if they actually are going to go through the learning content or not. In the publish stage, you verify the fields and you add the last field, which is the persistent identifier. Remember, to have minimum fair learning materials, they need to be indexed in a repository and get a persistent identifier. So it's a process. We don't expect you to do everything at once. The process, we started with the first step. So for prepare, the final idea is to envision and have in mind your learning goals and objectives. Then you will move on to the next stage, where based on the plan for assessments, you will be able to plan the learning activities and say, okay, if I want people to be able to do this and that, I need to present them the learning content in this and that way. That's the idea of the backward instructional design process. So for prepare, our main goal is let's determine the learning goals and objectives. And these are actually very much connected to the context of the learning and the target audience, right? It will be different if your target audience is general or if it's very specific scientific discipline. The context will be different depending on whether people have background knowledge, they don't have background knowledge, whether it's beginner, intermediate, expertise level, or any other type of interaction you might have with them. So you need to think about who are you preparing these materials for? What do they know from before? What do you want them to know about? And then all of these answers are actually going to take you to the answer, what is your specific target audience? The answer to target specific audience will then help you develop learning objectives that are targeting this audience, that are going to actually help this audience learn about the topic you want them to learn in the best way, and make sure that you prepare them for this learning experience in the best way. we said that we are going to define the learning objectives using the Bloom's taxonomy. It is the easiest way to create what we call smart learning objectives. The idea is that depending on the level of knowledge that you want to impart to the learning audience, you choose specific verbs that describe what our people should be able to do after they learn from your learning materials. So you see, according to the Bloom's taxonomy, there are different levels, starting from knowledge, then comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. As you go up, the people are actually gaining more knowledge about the topic and how to apply this topic into practical situations. If you're down in the lower levels, then we are talking about a beginner level, that they are just understanding what is happening, what is this, what is the definition, how it works, but they are not still at the moment of actually applying this into practice and figuring out how it connects and develops and influences other things. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to use verbs that are inside this light bulb. They are going to help you define the learning objectives in the best way. The idea is not to use vague words. Many times when we develop learning materials and we are kind of, I need to write learning objectives, I don't have time, I will just write something like, understand the FAIR by design methodology. Understand is a very bad verb in learning objectives because it doesn't tell you anything. It's not specific, it's not measurable, it doesn't define the expectations for the learners. What does it mean to understand the methodology? You can apply it. You can say that it's combining 6 stages, that it's based on the backward instructional design process. What is it? It doesn't tell you much. So you need to make the effort to create a learning objective that will truly describe what is the output of this learning. So let's see if you can actually choose the most smart learning objectives from the ones that are provided here. Wow, 100% for the for the correct answer. That's great. Wow. Okay, that's the idea. So you want to create learning objectives that are truly smart. So they are specific, they are measurable, they are attainable, they are time bound. In this case, the answer is within 1 hour, the participants will be able to accurately map 80% of the given set of diverse reusable elements to corresponding terms from a pre-selected domain-specific control vocabulary, demonstrating consistency and precision. You see how long this learning objective is compared to the others. So it requires a bit more effort to really, truly make it smart, but it's worth it because when people see that, they are really clear about, okay, this is what I'm going to learn with this learning material. If you break it down into pieces, it's specific because it details the action and the target and the source, right? It tells you about the desired outcome, which is consistency and precision. It is measurable because you provide real measures, such as the 80%, such as the time limit of 1 hour. It's achievable because people can actually do it after they go through your learning materials. It's relevant because it addresses a specific topic related to the topic of your learning materials. It has a time constraint, so it's time bound. And in addition, it is domain specific because it talks about domain specific vocabularies, and it adds a layer of quality by using these things such as consistency and precision. So these are the things that you need to think about when you're defining the smart learning objectives. And here are some tips and tricks on what to think about when you define smart learning objectives. You see, the X's are something that you should not do, and then the green check marks are something that says, okay, yes, you should make it look something like this. The idea is, as I mentioned before, try to avoid vague terms, such as learn and understand, because in the end, they don't really mean anything. Try to use a criteria to track the progress and determine when the goal is achieved. Try to ensure that the objective is realistic, given the time, the abilities, whether they are beginners or not, the resources that they are going to use. Make sure that the objective is relevant for the people. right? So not something like memorize the history of open access, but actually talk about open access and how it supports open science, for an example. And provide a time frame or a deadline or something. Give them something to achieve in a specific time window. This is really, really, truly going to help people that are looking at the learning materials to decide, yes, this is for me. And I know exactly what I'm going to get in the end once I go through this training or once I do this self-paced course or whatever the learning material is. Okay, so at this point, we talked about prepare. We talked about choosing a metadata schema. In this example of the FAIR by Design methodology, we will be using the RDA minimum metadata schema, but as I said, it's not a must. You can choose a different one if you want. And for the learning materials, up to now, we defined the purpose, the target audience, the learning objectives. Now we move on to the next stage, which is discover, because every time you want to create new learning materials, you don't try to start from scratch, right? You go out there into the world, you see what's out there, and you try to reuse something that you think is relevant for your context and for what you are trying to produce. So the idea is to do a discovery of existing learning materials that you might be able to reuse. I'm saying you might be able to reuse because you cannot really reuse everything. It needs to be open. Under open, I mean it needs to be coming with a permissible license for reuse. In our world, that mostly means that the license under which the learning materials are provided is most probably the Creative Commons license. And even in that case, there are some specifics that we are going to talk about later. If there is no permissible license, then you cannot reuse these learning materials because they're closed. However, they also have value in a sense that they will inspire you while you're thinking and you're designing your learning materials. They will get you going, thinking about how to do something, and you can still use them from that point of view. Where to search for learning materials? This is the main questions that I get every time for this stage. And I'm sorry, but the short answer is there is no one magical place where you go to search and whoop, everything comes up, at least not at the moment. There might be in the future. So it's up to you to really do a thorough search throughout the web using open educational resources and repositories, maybe EOSC, repositories from different projects, if it's something related to a topic of an EOSC project, or try to go to a general repository such as Zenodo or OSF or the Creative Commons search, for an example, and so on. One of the things you shouldn't forget at this stage is that while you're searching for learning content, the content is not necessarily just text or something. It's also multimedia, because when you are thinking about learning materials, you should always think about the learning experience of the people that use them, right? And in order to achieve high learning experience, you need to provide learning resources that are adapted to the modalities of the different learners. So that means think about people that are thinking about read and write, but also audio files for the ones that are more auditory oriented, visual, diagrams, images, videos and stuff, and kinesthetic in a sense of activities and case studies and practical things that they can do in order to learn about the topic that is of your learning material. So you have the task to create a module on introduction to open access. You need to go through stage discover, search for existing learning materials. One of the very important things is which types of keywords you're going to use in order to get what you want. Choosing the right keywords can actually help you get the right content from the repositories where you're searching. So what would you use as keyword when someone tells you, okay, let's try to search and reuse existing learning materials on the topic of introduction to open access? Trying to see if someone wants to share a keyword that they would use in Particify. Let's see. Okay, free as a keyword. That's cool. Open as well. Open educational resource. We are or something like that. But also think about the other stuff that you want them to, these learning materials to have, right? For an example, you are targeting beginners because the topic is Introduction to Open Access with this title. I'm sure it's not for intermediate or expert level. So maybe you also use the word beginners, right? Or as someone said here, undergraduate or something like that. Open access introduction using the title is always a good thing. Open Science will provide you with a list of wider topics, and then by reviewing them, you can try to figure out what works best for you. Open access would be my first choice, yes, because it's introduction to open access. Let's see what everything is out there in open access and stuff like that. So yeah, you're basically on the right track. Many of you are writing keywords that are really related to the topic. Here are some tips and tricks on effective search for existing learning materials. When you're choosing your keywords, try to use keywords that reflect the topic, the discipline, and the intended use. For an example, if you want to create a self-paced course on Introduction to Open Access, try searching for a self-paced course, right? Or if you want to focus on a specific part of open access, try searching for this. Or use open access publishing tutorial, for an example, if you are focusing on open access publishing. You will not always get the results that you're searching for on the first try of searching, right? So try to search again using synonyms or related terms. For an example, you don't just search for fair data, you also search for data stewardship or for open data management or resource data sharing. So don't give up and try synonyms. It's always a good idea to try searching according to the metadata elements. So you saw the fields from the RDA minimum metadata schema. Think about searching and using words that you expect them to show up in some of the fields of the schema of the learning materials that you would like to reuse. And then use Boolean operators to combine multiple keywords together. It should have this and this, or this, but not this, and things like that. Of course, you need to go through several different types of repositories while you're searching, because as I said before, there is no one magic repository that will give you all the answers and all the materials that you're trying to search. Now, when you get your results and you decide, this is great, I want to reuse this. In order to reuse it, the content has to be available under a permissible license. If the content is not available under a permissible license, then the only option is to cite this content. Citing this content means using a very small piece, like a sentence or something, and then providing the citing attribution. Or the other option, reach out to the owner and ask for explicit permission for reuse. This is also an option if you want to use it. If you don't want these two options, citing and reaching out, then make sure that when you're looking at the licenses, you are actually working with learning content that is available under a Creative Commons or a similar license. And as it says on the slide, even in that case, you need to be careful because it depends on what you are going to do next. When we say Creative Commons licenses, we mean licenses such as this. So maybe CC BY, maybe CC BY SA, CC BY non-commercial, CC BY non-commercial share alike, CC BY non-derivative, or BY non-commercial non-derivative, right? All of these licenses are actually combinations of these different rights, which are the attribution, the share alike, the non-commercial, and the no-derivative right. Whatever you choose, whatever license it is. So any type of CC license is fine. Okay, it doesn't matter if it is just BY or if it is the longest possible thing like BY, NC, SA, and D, everything together. You can reuse it under certain rules that we will talk about later. But everything that you reuse, you have to attribute. And this is a moral right, and it's always needed, and it's always written down in the Creative Commons license says that everything that you reuse must be attributed to the author. The question now is, how do you attribute? So you decided, you searched, you found something, you checked the license, CC BY, great, I can reuse it, I will reuse it. How do I attribute? The first rule is, if the author supplied how to be attributed, then use this format that they told you, okay? When you reuse this, please cite me as blah, 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 blah. If they didn't provide this information, because they don't always have to provide this information, then if it is a CC license and it works for other licenses as well, the best solution is to use the so-called tassel method. The tassel method is the so-called ideal attribution by Creative Commons. Tassel comes from the first letters of the things that you need to provide during the attribution. So you need to provide the title, the name of the work, the author created the work, the source where the original work that you're reusing can be found, and the license under which this work is provided. For the license, usually Creative Commons says that you should provide the name of the license and also the link to the license. For the source, the idea is that usually you provide a link that is combined with the title of the work. And there is this great link that you can take a look later, but you will have these materials for your own review later on with recommended practices for attribution by Creative Commons. Here are some attribution examples. So how do you attribute an image? The title, by, author, licensed under, license name, link. If the image is adapted, and that means that the license has to allow derivatives. So if you're trying to adapt something, you cannot, if the license says no derivatives. So only licenses without no derivatives can be adapted. In that case, after the attribution, you also need to provide a short description of your adaptations. In this case, it's cropped from original. If you are attributing text, you can, for an example, do something like, I don't know, if it is a book or if it's another learning material, whatever, this chapter is from, title, by, author, license. Or it can be, the attribution can be defined by the source. For an example, I'm a huge fan of using Pixabay for different types of open images. They say, okay, if you're reusing this image, this is the way to attribute. You have to write image by name of the author with link to the author's page from Pixabay link to the Pixabay site, because this is how they prefer to be attributed. So let's see now how good are you with attributing. Let's say you decided to incorporate a video clip into your advanced data analysis techniques module. The video is licensed under CC BY SA40. Which of the following attributions is the most compliant with both license terms and copyright law? Amazing, you're so good at this. I'm wondering, why are you at this training? You know everything already. Okay, there is a question, why is the tassel method not including the PID? Well, basically it is including it in a, let's call it indirect way with the source, because if it has a persistent identifier, then the link will include this persistent identifier. So it will be inside the link to the source. The persistent identifier is not something that is required by Creative Commons. They don't say that every resource has to have a PID. So that's why it's not explicitly mentioned. But if there is a PID, then the link to the source should be based on this PID. For this question here, pay attention that the correct answer includes this copyright year creator name. And this is also very important for you to remember. Some of the works don't include copyright. In this case, this part copyright will not be existing in the attribution. But if the work has copyright, then Creative Commons says you have to include it in the attribution. It's a must. Okay, so make sure you read it well. If you see the copyright sign, make sure you write whatever is behind the copyright sign. It usually happens, for an example, in my case, because I'm creating learning materials while I'm teaching at the university. The materials are mine in the sense that I'm the author, I decide the license, but the copyright belongs to my university, to my faculty. So it's the same thing with some books or something like that. Usually when you are doing this reuse, you will choose multiple materials to reuse. So make sure you have attribution for every piece that you are reusing, right? Every piece should have a permissible license. The attribution should be done in such a way that it's very, very clear. I don't need to think at all in deciding which attribution belongs to which work. So don't do stuff like attributing at the end for everything or attributing at the beginning for everything. You attribute for each reused section individual. If it's a bigger section, you usually attribute before the section, like this next section is based on blah, 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 blah. If it's just an image or something, then you can attribute right under the image. But make sure that if you're reusing multiple stuff, you need to attribute for each one in a very, very clear way. Now that we know how to attribute and we chose what we are going to reuse, we are ready to go into the next stage, which is the design stage. In the design stage, we are designing our learning materials. That means that we are going to define the concept, create a structure, how many pieces is it going to have, how are they going to fit together, and so on. See what are the licenses of the things that we're going to reuse, how are we going to reuse them, and based on all of this information, decide on the license of our learning materials, the ones that we are going to produce next in the produce stage. So let's talk a little bit about this designing stuff. The first thing that you need to do is grab a piece of paper and start jotting down your thoughts. We call this sketching a concept map. So you know the title, you know the learning objectives, right? You did your search and discover, you know what is out there, you decided which pieces are very interesting and you would like to reuse. You got inspired from the ones that are great, but you cannot reuse. And now you have an idea in your head how to put it all together, right? How to divide it into topics, which topic comes first, which second, what is the main purpose of each of these pieces, how many are they going to be, is every piece going to be a standalone, or you still need to divide it into sub-pieces because it's a big thing, and so on. So the concept map helps you put everything down and see how they fit together. And then you create like a blueprint of how you want things to look like. And this blueprint is the basis of preparing the syllabus. Once you have the syllabus, then you do a deep dive. You say, okay, I have these topics I want to go through now. For each topic, this is how I'm going to do it. These are the parts that I'm going to reuse. These parts I need to develop by myself in order to have everything I want. And when we say develop by myself, it means I need to create a plan on how this is going to be developed, why it's going to be structured this way, how every topic is going to be addressed effectively. What is the content going to look like? What it's going to have inside? Inside this content, what kind of activities I'm going to provide for the learner in order to make sure that he truly grasps the concept that I'm trying to teach him about, and how I'm going to assess all of this. When you are in the design stage and you think about all of these pieces, the idea of the design is to make sure you think you have all of the pieces, you put them in a structure that makes them fit together. You're still not developing them. You're not writing text. You're not choosing the images and everything, but just creating the idea of how it's all going to come together. What is the thought? How I'm going to assess people, how I'm going to structure the content in order to make sure that I will reach the learning objectives that I defined in the beginning. Don't also forget to think about stuff such as facilitation guide, and feedback. Because once the learning materials are made available to learners, it's very, very important to gain feedback from them, to see what works well, what doesn't work well. This is really going to help you to make them better, because they're not perfect on the first try, right? No matter how much you put your attention to and everything, you might forget something, or you really, your learners are the ones that are going to have the learning experiences. So you cannot always put yourself into their shoes and make it perfect the first time. You need the feedback in order to improve it. So feedback is basically mostly learners telling you how to improve the learning material. Facilitation guide is helping others reuse your material. So this is, for you, this is something like, okay, I should not forget that before I give the materials to the learners, I should do this and that. While I'm giving them, I should make sure I'm doing this, 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 and this. In the end, I should send them a feedback form, ping them, send them more materials, whatever you want to do. This is the facilitation guide. So what are you supposed to do in order to effectively deliver the learning content that is going to be created? So let's talk about this in a bit more details. We said, okay, first sketch a concept map. This is going to be your blueprint for the syllabus. Think about the syllabus as a sort of instructional sequence, like an outline or an agenda or table of content of your learning material, whatever works for you. It doesn't matter how you call it. You don't have to call it syllabus if you don't want to. But basically, this is the main structure of your learning materials. Now, what is very important in the FAIR by design methodology is to have this syllabus or outline or description or whatever you call it in such a way that it contains all of the fields from the RDA minimum metadata schema or any other metadata schema that you chose. Maybe you chose a different one, but you need this document where you have all of these fields of the RDA minimum metadata schema. And this is going to basically be the description of your learning resource. So when you are in the end going to be publishing the learning resource, the content of this document will be the metadata that describes your learning materials. And this metadata needs to be freely available, open to everyone, so that it's usable, so that it's findable in the first place. And then whether the content itself is open or not, this depends on the access rules. But the metadata always has to be open and freely available to everyone. So a syllabus is the document where you have the metadata. It can be human readable format only, or it can be a mix of human readable and machine readable. This is how we do it when we develop learning materials in Skills4EOSC, but it's up to you. I mean, it depends on the tools that you're using, whether you can do both or you can do just once. So the elements of the syllabus are the ones that you see here. The ones that are marked with stars, these are the actual RDA minimum metadata schema. Now, the others that do not have a stars, these are extra. We are using them because we need them. You might also need them, so that's why I put them here. But if you don't need them, you don't need to really use them. For an example, are there any prerequisites for your learning materials? Well, it depends on the level, right? If it's an intermediate expert, most probably there will be prerequisites. For a beginner, no. Is there any certification information? If there is, you should really provide it available for everyone before they access the learning materials. If not, then maybe you just skip this. Are the authors and the trainers the same or different people? Sometimes they are the same, sometimes they're different. Providing contact information is also very good for people that would like to use your learning materials, but they have more questions, for an example. Adding accessibility mission is a great thing because it shows your support of creating accessible learning materials. So people that look at this record in the repository say, okay, these learning materials, they have been checked for accessibility. So they should be very high quality and things like that. So the most important thing is have all of the fields of the metadata schema add additional ones if you think you need them. All of these fields, as I mentioned before, are going to be visible to people when they search through the learning materials and they decide whether they are going to use them as learners or instructors. They're looking for reuse of the same thing. Let's go now to the next topic of the design phase, and this is the definition of the structure of the learning material. So when you are designing learning materials, of course, we said we are striving to reach optimum reusability and adaptability within diverse educational contexts, because other people, other instructors will need the materials, but they will need to adapt them to their own context. Which approach to granularity and organization of the material you think would be most effective? Great, you are with me on the same page. So yes, the idea here in the design stage is to keep this in mind. Divide the content into smaller pieces. We call them learning objects. You can call them anything you want, for example, micro-learning module. But the idea is for it to be small and self-contained, because put yourself in the shoes of another instructor that comes to see if they can reuse something from your learning material. If it's a very big bundle of everything in one document, and I just want one piece, it's very difficult for me to cut out that piece from the rest if it's not self-contained, if I cannot find it easily. It will be, stuck somewhere in between different things. I have to go scroll, search, decide from where until there is the self-contained things and everything. So to help them reuse, to help you repurpose these small bits for different learning units, it's always great to organize your learning material into small self-contained learning objects. And for an example, when we are implementing the Fair by Design methodology for us in Skills4EOSC, we are trying to create a logical structure like the one that you see here on the screen. The root tells you the beginning of the learning resource, and then there are different levels using folder trees where you keep different information. For an example, right away, you are providing information like a README description of the resources, the license of the resources, how you want these resources to be cited or attributed, and the code of conduct, because we always usually work in groups when we are developing the learning materials. The materials themselves are inside this resources folder. And here you see the first thing that you see is the syllabus. Then there is the feedback with questions on how you're going to obtain feedback from the learners, and the facilitator guide that tells you how to use these materials, how to prepare before, during, and after. And then the content itself, it's inside this section module units. These levels basically depend on how big the learning material is that you're developing. It might be just one learning unit. If it's a small thing, then there will be one folder. Or maybe you just have 2 or 3 learning units. It doesn't matter. If it is a big thing, try to cut it into logical pieces. If it's a small thing, then you will just have one folder for the learning material. Inside this folder, you will have the content, the unit plan, the assessment, and the description of the activities. You might also have optional stuff. For an example, in our case, we usually have also additional slide deck that we use during the training. If it's an online or face-to-face workshop, we usually also need to develop slides together with the content in order to make sure everything is running smoothly. So you don't have to do it this way. It's not like mandatory or something that you need to use this structure. This is just an example. The idea is to use a structure, okay, to logically divide the pieces into self-contained groups, because this is going to help very, very much to actually reuse the content. Now, here comes the part where you need to decide what is going to be the license of your produced learning materials. So what do you think is the best option if you can use it? This best option is going to maximize the reuse by others of your learning materials. So you are going to develop learning materials. You need to decide what license am I going to put to my learning materials. What is the best option for maximizing reuse? Oh, okay, here we have different opinions. That's interesting. Okay, most of you are for CC BY, but we have a very nice group that is voting for CC0. Some are for CC BY non-commercial, and some are for CC BY share alike. All of them are good options for different reasons. Okay, the one that we recommend is the CC BY. And I will tell you why. You can agree or you can disagree. Don't worry, it's up to you. You decide on the license you put on your learning materials. This is just me telling you why do we say that for us, the best license is CC BY. Basically, the idea is that if you're using CC BY, you maximize reuse because you don't put any constraints. If I put SA, for an example, then the derivation, the adaptation or anything has to be a CC BY SA license. So if I put SA, then the other one that is going to reuse my resources, they have to put SA as well. So from that point of view, it's a bit restrictive. If I put non-commercial, then I'm great with sharing my materials for non-commercial purposes. But if someone for commercial purposes would like to reuse them, then it's a problem and they cannot do it. The one thing that we never recommend, and it's not available in the list of the question, is to use non-derivative type of CC. So CC BY non-derivative. Why? Because in this case, reuse is very difficult because adaptation is not allowed. So if anyone gets your material you provided with non-derivative, they can just reuse it as it is. They cannot translate, they cannot cut, they cannot crop. They can't do anything to it. So that's why this is a no. Now, if we are choosing between CC BY and CC0, which is actually the two highest rated scores in our question here, the difference is that if you are putting CC0, then attribution is not required. It is still a moral right, but now it comes to the goodwill of the person that is reusing. They don't have to do it. If it is CC BY, then the Creative Commons license asks you, so it's a must, that you have to attribute. In CC0, this is more of a, it can, but it doesn't have to be the case. So that's why the common recommendation is you use CC0 when you create work for the public good, in a sense that you allow others to reuse without any concern for attribution. So you just give up from attribution. You say, okay, this is for the world. Whoever wants they can reuse it. They don't have to attribute me. That's the thing. Now, when we are talking about deciding on your license, you have to make sure that you choose the right license depending on what you decided to reuse. Okay, so there are two types of reuses of learning materials inside the Creative Commons. One is called combining, the other one is called remixing or derivative or adaptation. Combining is when you take pieces from different places. These pieces are used as they are. You can adapt them a little bit, of course, to your context. If the license is not using no derivatives, if there is no derivatives, you cannot adapt it. But you use them as they are in the context that they were created. You don't create a new version with a completely new context for them. Creative Commons allows you to combine any CC licenses in this way. What does it mean? In this presentation, for an example, I have images that are licensed CC BY, that are licensed CC BY non-commercial, that are licensed CC BY share alike, and so on. So I have most of the CC licenses. And because what I'm doing is combining, I'm not changing the context of this materials and not doing anything. I'm just reusing them and showing them as examples, putting them into the wider picture of my trainings. This is fine. This is what we call combining. But if you decide to take something to reuse, but to change it in such a way that it becomes an adaptation, it becomes a new version of the original form. So you put some creativity inside it, and this is different than the original. In that case, what you need to do is define a correct adapter license for this material. And this means that the license for this material cannot be whatever you choose. The first rule is when you combine multiple things to remix, not every license works with every other license. For an example, when you're adapting, of course, you cannot choose anything from no derivatives because you cannot adapt no derivatives. But for an example, when you have a material that is CC BY share alike, you cannot combine it into a remix with CC BY non-commercial share alike, because this table doesn't allow you to do that. So be careful if you want to do this kind of adaptations and remixings. Basically, we try to avoid this because it's problematic. But if you are doing it, make sure you take a look at this compatibility licenses table and also the table for choosing the adapters license. So the licenses have to be compatible to mix them together and create something new. And then this new thing, which is yours, you need to define an adapters license for this. And this is why, for an example, share alike is a very specific license in some cases, because if the status of the original work is a share alike license, then the only license that can be provided for the adapters license is also a share alike license, the same license, nothing else. That's why we try to use just CC BY as much as possible so that we can provide this freedom to other people to also do adaptations of our works, because you see, if it is CC BY, then basically the only maybe problematic thing would be to provide the new thing, the adapted thing, into the public domain, which is CC0. But even this is under yellow, so under some circumstances, I can do it.
Sonja,
okay.
I'm just going to interrupt you for a second, because this has been fantastic so far. But I'm noticing that there are quite a lot of questions in the chat. And so thank you so much, everybody, for your contributions. They're great. Like I'm watching this conversation unfold alongside it, and I think everybody is doing a great job of answering questions where there are some. But maybe, Sonja, just to draw your attention that sometimes there are questions in the chat. Now we will be having a Q&A at the very end, as we discussed. So maybe if people have overall questions, they could save them for the end, because there'll be plenty of time to ask. But also, if you do have an important question, pop it in the chat, and maybe, Sonja, we could take a little bit of time just for you to check some of them as well. But how would you like to do this? I mean, maybe when we take a break in the webinar, you could have a quick look.
Yes, so in kind of 5 minutes, we are going to get a break. So I will go through the questions then. And then when we come back, I will address all of the questions, and then we'll continue. Does this sound okay?
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Okay. So let's finish with design. I just have a few more things for you. And the first thing is a question that you already answered, some of you. Okay, so to effectively and consistently deliver a learning module and be able to adapt it to diverse learning environments, which of the following components is the most critical addition to the learning content? And yes, you said comprehensive instructor kit, including a lesson plan, activity descriptions, assessment strategies, facilitation guide, and feedback questions. This is where time comes into play with the FAIR by design methodology. These are the things, let's be honest, nobody does if they don't have to, unless they are, let's say, obsessive like I am when I'm doing learning materials. But they are really, really great for reuse. So try to add extra time and put this down onto paper. You do this in your head, you do this, you do a plan. you do a description of the activity, you do decide on the strategy of the assessment, on the questions, on the everything. So you just need to write it down. It doesn't have to be a long document or something, but try to write it down. It's great for other people to reuse. And also, if you come back to the same material in 1 year from now, right, you'll be, what I was thinking then, why I did it like this, like that. These documents are going to help you come back to it and say, okay, yes, this was for this and that was for that, and so on. So think about these pieces. These are not a must, but these are increasing your level of verification, right? Each of these pieces. For an example, in the learning unit plan, you are going to create a plan with the topic, with the duration of each part, the key points, what are the teaching methods that you're going to use for these points and everything. You will write a small piece like reflection once you did it. This worked, this didn't. Maybe I choose this, I switch this and do this. You decide how you do the assessment, formative like we do it here, questions between the topics, or in the end, you ask everything and then get the answers. These are the things that we are talking about. And pay attention while you're answering this question that you actually develop a plan, even when the content is online, even when the content is self-paced, because the plan actually describes your concept, describes your idea, and then helps other people understand why you structured it this way, why this is first and this is second, why is the activity put right here after this moment, because there is a reason why this was done, and the plan is the one that actually tells you how to do this. And you are very good in answering these questions, and you always get, most of the time, you get a 100% correct answers in most of them. So the idea of the plan is to actually provide what are the effective teaching methods that can be used in order to make sure that the learners truly comprehend the learning content. So they actually tell you how you combine the activities with the rest of the content in order to get them thinking about the topic. When we say combine with activities, we also need you to describe how to do the activities, right? If you describe how to do the activities, then maybe we get to a situation where I would like to reuse the activity for something completely different. I really like the activity, but I don't need it for introduction to open access. I need it for, I don't know, something else. Introduction to computer networks, for an example. And then if I have this document with the description of the activity, I can really easily adapt it to my learning context. So that's why it's very important to have it. For the assessment, the idea is to think about the types of questions, how you're going to do the assessment. Is it going to be project-based? Is it going to be a survey? Is it going to be a case study? Is it going to be a practical exercise or whatever? Why did you choose that for this particular learning material? Because there must have been a reason. And when you're thinking about the assessment, you also need to think it from the Bloom's taxonomy point of view, because the Bloom's taxonomy and the levels that we did in the beginning, they tell you, for an example, what types of questions are good for the given level. For an example, if you are in the level of remember and understand, which were the low levels, then you can do true, false questions or multi-choice or something like that. But if you want something that is on the highest level, create, then you need to figure out a different way how you're going to assess, because true, false is not going to do it. In this case, you have this large answer, which could be a assignment, case study, problem solving, whatever you decide. For the facilitation guide, we already talked about this before. So the idea is to tell them, okay, to do this training, for an example, this is what you need to do before, during, after. If it is online, before, send the participants an email with this. During, remind them of the deadlines, tell them to use the forum, give them rights to this and that. After, remind them to do the feedback, give them links to additional material, do this, do that, and so on. So there are things that require organization, and the facilitation guide actually contains this information, how to organize the delivery of the learning materials. And finally, the feedback. We said it's very important because it helps you improve. There are two types of feedback, quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative is to just give me a grade. Was it, I don't know, 5 or 3 or 1 star or whatever. Qualitative is give me feedback with words. I like this part, I didn't like this part. I think this should be added, this should be removed. The activity was good, but the other content was bad, and so on. And both are important in their own ways. To help you with all of these documents, what we did in the Fair by Design methodology, we created templates for all of these documents, and you can find them on this link here in a template repository that is available under CC0 because we are not asking for attribution, and the idea is to be reused by everyone. So they will help you with creating a blueprint of what you need to write for a plan, for an activity, for facilitation guide, for assessment. And then you just need to sit down and put this information on paper, and this will help you make your materials even more fair than ever before. With this, we are closing the design stage, and we are now going on a coffee break. So you have 10 minutes to walk around, grab a coffee, grab tea, whatever. We'll come back at 11:30. Until then, I will go through all of your questions, and then I will try to address them before we move on to the next stage, which is produce after 10 minutes. So see you in a bit.
Sonja, just a practical question. I think the questions in the chat are pretty much already translated into your tool. So you can see the Q&A. I think almost all of them are there in the Q&A.
Oh, okay, perfect. I will be looking at them from there then.
Thank you. See you in a thing.
Amelia, yes, we are back to recording. So before we move on to the next stage, which is produce, we went through prepare, discover, and design. We're halfway through. Let's just go through some of the questions that you were putting in the chat to address them now so that we don't forget them later. So first one was, how can materials be compatible with diverse educational platforms because they are rather closed? Exactly, that's why we say, okay, try using open file formats, because open file formats can be consumed by different tools. What does it mean in practice? You don't really export, I don't know, a Moodle learning object and you say, okay, this can be imported into another Moodle, maybe in Blackboard or a similar learning management system. But try to export it into a different format that is for wider use, right? If it is a page, export it as HTML. If it is, I don't know, images or something video, try to export it in the file format in this. In this way, you will be able to provide the materials for others to reuse in different platforms. How does RDA link to the learning object metadata model? Well, it doesn't really. For this, I will leave you to read the document for RDA because I'm not one of the people that defined the metadata schema, so I'm not going to get into that. It's not always the longest answer that is correct, be careful. How do we define learning materials? Well, basically, we define learning objects. If you remember, I told you in the beginning. So minimum one learning objective, the plan, the content, description of the activity, the assessment. Okay, this is what we want. This is what we are doing in the Fair by Design methodology. Yes, there are different places where you can search for open educational materials. Is there a wizard to help you create? I'm afraid no. It's just the trainings, all of the materials that we wrote and everything. I will give you a bunch of links in the end to help you with the process, but there is no guide that is click, and you get there. I'm sorry. What is duration in the syllabus? This is a field from the RDA metadata schema, so they describe it in time-wise, so in hours, in minutes, or something. And any objective way to measure this, you give it to a test learner and see how much time they need to go through the material. That would be my suggestion, but I don't really have the definitive answer. How to deal with AI harvesting? Oh, this is a great question for which I don't really have the solution. CC advice there, really, no. Any CC license you put, it's not going to help you with a CC harvester. And I mean, what are you going to do then? Sue or something? Basically, at this point, there is no solution for this. But remember that when you talk about FAIR, and we will talk about this again in this second session, it's not always open, okay? FAIR can have access rules. What is open is the metadata. This is what has to be open. The content itself, it can be also for pay. It's not always fully open. Yes, with CC0, you don't know who actually provided it. For CC BY, share alike, yes, if you want to create a community, that everything this community creates will be the same license and everything, it is a possibility to do this. Me personally, when I talk about sharing and reuse, I don't want to lock out any type of other share and reuse, even if someone takes my learning materials and reuses them for commercial purposes. I don't care. I mean, I'm happy they're reused as long as they're attributed, and I'm entitled to my attribution with the license. And I can complain if I'm not attributed, and I will win in court if necessary. So, and of course, at any point of time when you have any type of CC license, if you think that your learning materials are reused in a context that is not aligned with your moral norms, with your ethics standards or whatever, you can ask them to take it down and they have to comply. You tell them this is not how I envisioned my materials are going to be reused. You're putting them into a bad context. They need to take them out. Credit transfer, yes, the credits are related to duration, but unfortunately with the European credit transfer system is that in different countries, one credit is can be different duration. Somewhere it's 1 hour, somewhere it's 2 hours, or I don't know, a different number. So if you just say credits, it's not really the same everywhere. So better use hours or something. Concerning licenses, okay, this CC BY non-commercial that you used, I understand the reasons why you want to use it. This is the license that under which you give rights to others. But as you mentioned yourself, because you are the author, you have the full right to do whatever you want. So even if you license out your learning materials under non-commercial, you can always use it in a commercial environment. It's yours, so you are not restricting yourself. You're restricting others in how they can reuse your material. I think we covered everything so far. Feel free to write more questions as we go on. Now we're moving on to the next stage. So we went through prepare, discover, design. Let's go to produce. So we are coming out of design with knowing exactly what we want, how it's going to be structured, organized, what are all of the files and everything I need to fill in, what are the licenses of the reused materials, are they compatible if I'm doing remixing, what is the final license of my material. This is what we decided. Now it's time to sit down and do the new content, right? Because you will reuse pieces, but you will still need to create new content. So now you need to choose the tools and the formats for whatever new you're going to produce. Make sure that you're working with 2 different versions. Editable version while you are producing, but also these editable files will be shared with other instructors, okay? So make sure you save them and you share them for other instructors to reuse the editable formats. The final formats are what you do in the end. You use the editable to produce final, and you give them to the learners. So final is for learners, editable is for you, and for reuse with other instructions. If multiple people are working together, of course, you try to work in a collaborative environment using versioning, and you always try to choose open file format. This is what is important. This is where accessibility comes into play. Okay, so whatever you produce and you design, try to at least check it with an accessibility checker if it is okay or not, and follow the guide to tell you how to make it more accessible. There are now checkers into many of the tools. They're quite easy to use. They're even becoming more widespread. So it's a pity not to use them because you really want to cover the widest range of learners. And this produce thing is not a straight line. Okay, you don't go file by file creating and doing, you go here, go back there, change here, change there, and you do back and forth iterations. Just make sure that while you are changing stuff everywhere, you still have all of the metadata in the syllabus, preferably in the human and the machine readable format, because most probably you will go back at some point and change something because you say, this is better and so on. Make sure the license is still okay because you might decide to change something. Make sure you write the facilitation guide. Once everything is done, at least the initial draft version and everything, do a quick self-assessment. This is like, do I have all of the elements that I defined I need in design? And then you go through them qualitatively and check if you have all of the content you envisioned, is it structured the right way? It's not a very deep dive quality assessment, but it's like a self-check. Let's see if we're doing it fine. So let's see, what do you think? While you're developing and maintaining learning resources for long-term use and collaborative contribution, which of the following practices is most critical? So you're working in a group, you want to maintain learning resources for a longer time. Yes, of course, you want to use a dedicated version control and collaboration system to track the changes, to manage the contributions, to facilitate collaborative editing. The Fear by Design methodology doesn't tell you you have to use this system. It doesn't tell you you have to use these file formats, okay? It's not restrictive in that way. So what you see here are just examples. For an example, the way we implement it while we are developing training materials like this, while we are developing other training materials, is we use Markdown for the editable content. If we are using slide decks, we use PowerPoint because it's also open file format. Then when it comes to final content from the Markdown, we produce HTML. From the slides, we produce PDF. For the granular versioning and for the collaborative environment, we chose to use GitHub because it's easy for us. If something else is easier for you to use that, but make sure you use some kind of environment that helps you collaborate in the most efficient way and tracks the versions of your files. This is what is important, and this is the recommendation of the Fear by Design methodology. Now, while you're designing and producing the content, don't forget about the modalities that we mentioned before. So add some diagrams, charts, and images. See if you can find some audio recordings or podcasts or something. Provide written explanations and interactive reading materials. Try to think about some kind of interactive activities or virtual labs or something to cater to the different modalities. Now, which are the most important modalities for you? It depends. There is a research that says that the modalities are related to the skill level for which you are producing your learning materials. For an example, if it is beginners or novices, someone with low skill level, then you should focus on visual aids and on kinesthetics, so hands-on tasks. If it is intermediate learners that are trying to develop their proficiency on the topic, then the focus of the type of content of your learning materials should be oral and read-write. So discussions, self-explanation tasks, additional text-based material. If it is advanced expert learners, Then the research says the best way is to keep it kinesthetic and oral. So presentations, debates, peer teaching, unstructured real-world problems such as case studies, simulation, or mentorship or coaching or something like that. So keep this in mind. It might help you while you're thinking what approach to take for different skills levels. Of course, when you are integrating multimedia into the learning content, because this is the way to address audio, visual, hands-on, and so on, think about the different types of multimedia, right? If it's images, don't forget about the descriptive alternative text. Also, in some places, consider using icons as easier to understand than real images. For videos, try to embed them in the content, but also provide links to download them separately. Consider GIFs, because this is very trendy now, especially with the younger audience, if you have younger audience. For audios, don't forget the transcripts and the control of the audio for the speed, start, and pause, and things like that. If you're using interactive elements, for an example, for activities, then make sure you test the compatibility and the responsiveness, especially in different browsers, in different tools, in different resolutions, and so on. We have a few do and don't tips and tricks for you in this area related to using multimedia and accessibility of multimedia. For an example, when you're producing the learning content, maintain a consistent style. Test compatibility always, of course. Try to create a responsive design so that, especially if you're using HTML or something, so that it looks good on different screen sizes, because most of the stuff is digital these days, right? Always provide a download link for media. This helps people with accessibility issues, so they can view them at their own leisure, and it's easier for them. And always provide clear documentation for, I don't know, hands-on activities. For example, you might have Jupyter notebooks or stuff like that. What you don't want to do is overload with too much multimedia or use low quality media, because it will not help the learners. Don't forget to test all of the media content. Don't ignore accessibility, and this is very important if you're using multimedia, so make sure you have transcripts for videos, high contrast images, choose the right colors and everything. Don't link to unreliable external sources, because in 1 week from now or 1 month from now, it's not going to work anymore and you'll have a problem with your learning material. Don't use auto-playing media, because this is an accessibility issue. So you want the learners, to click play in order to listen. Don't neglect to attribute and to credit sources. We talked about this before, but let's give it another try so that you always remember, for proper citations and credits. And of course, don't rely solely on media. I mean, we are saying you should have it, but not just that. You should also have some kind of text around it and everything. Don't just do one thing. When you're checking for accessibility, when we say accessibility, we don't just mean people that need assistive technology in order to access your learning materials. For example, they have problems with the vision or hearing or anything. When we say accessibility, we also think about people with different cultural backgrounds, with different native languages, the different learning styles, and so on. So accessibility is wider than that. So you need to cover all of these aspects and think about them. For an example, here I'm trying to avoid my Balkan accent of English so much. It's not 100% foolproof, but I am aware of it and I'm trying to fix it as much as possible so that you can follow me better during the training. Here are some tips and tricks for accessibility, right? So try to use simple language. Don't overdo it with complexities. Always use headings. It's good to have a table of content because it helps the reader for people with vision impairments. Always use a high contrast color palette. And now most of the tools are complaining if you're not doing that. Don't use color as the only way to convey information. Use descriptive links, provide closed captions and transcripts. And you see here in this slide, I'm always using the accessibility checker of PowerPoint when I'm creating my slides. And you see how for the pink the text is black, and for the blue, the text is white, because this is the highest contrast. And if I don't do it this way, if I always use the same color of the font, PowerPoint is complaining that my contrast is not high enough. So let's see, how would you create an alternative text for an image? You have an image, it's in your online learning module, it depicts a complex graph showing the correlation between global temperature anomalies and carbon dioxide levels over the past 100 years. You need to provide alternative text. And yes, of course, C is the right option. But you see, because it's so long and contains all of this information, people are unfortunately mostly lazy. And in many of the cases, they're going to write something like data visualization of climate change. However, if you are the person that has visual impairments, this text doesn't really help you understand what was on the image. So pay attention to these kinds of things. On this link here, there is a great guide on writing alternative text. And you should really go to the link once you get the materials and go through it. The amazing thing is that it provides an example of the same image, having different alternative text depending on the context in which the image is used. And it's a great example of how you should write truly amazing alternative text. And don't forget, of course, if the image is decorative, then the alternative text is blank. This tells the reader, skip me, I'm not important, because I'm just decoration. I don't convey any information. Now that we produced, right, we wrote everything, we used open file formats, we checked for accessibility, we did our initial self-check, yes, I have everything I intended to have, yes, everything is good, yes, the license is compatible, yes, it's chosen, fine. We are ready to go to publish. Now we have the initial draft, or we have a new version if we already went one through the methodology. We are ready to publish. Before you click publish, or you do the process of publishing, sometimes it's manual, it's not fully automatic, you need to do some final preparations. The final preparations is to make sure you have all of the important accompanying files. For example, a README file that explains these materials are for this and that and so on. Don't forget about the citation file, how you want to be attributed, because, you know, we set the rule. If you provide how you want to be attributed, other people are supposed to use this. If you don't, then they will try to use Tussle or something else, depending where you put it. If you want to create an open collaboration on these learning materials, provide the code of conduct. So other people that would like to join the community on improving the materials know what are the rules of the game. And of course, don't forget to provide the license in also human-friendly and machine-friendly way. Now, when you publish to two places. The first place is a repository where you are going to publish the editable versions of the files, so the whole package of the editable versions for the instructors. Okay, so this is the place where you expect other instructors to come and search for reusable learning materials. You should provide them with editable file content. For the learners, you publish to a learning management system or to a website or to whatever you decide is the learning platform, let's call it, where learners are going to come to consume the material. And this is depending on the platform. This is the place where you might need to configure additional things like configure the assessment, set up the feedback. If it's a webinar, you need to add the room or define badges if you use this kind of certification or something like that. So these are the steps that you are doing in publish. What we do, for an example, and this is again, it's a recommendation, it's not a mandatory in the Fear by Design methodology. We say you should have a citation file. We use the citation file format. So for our materials, we provide a citation file that is citation.cff. And we use this link to define the file, to validate the CFF if it's fine and everything. And it is, for an example, compatible with Zenodo because in Skills4EOSC, we publish all of the editable formats of the materials in Zenodo. We have our Moodle learning platform where we provide the final content for the learners. So optional, but if you don't want to use it, think about something else that you would use. How are you going to define how you want to be attributed? Now, let's talk about code of conduct. So which of the following do you think best describes the primary purpose of the code of conduct published alongside open learning resources? I see the question is closed. And now it's live. So you can vote. And let's see, what do you think? Okay. Interesting. Okay, we have a divided opinion so far. Most of you are to establish a set of guidelines and expectations for respectful and inclusive behavior among contributors and users, which is the correct answer. So the stuff like detailed instructions on how to use the resource and report technical issues, and the specific technical requirements and software dependencies for accessing the resource are actually going into other files. Detailed instructions on how to use the resource are in the README. They can also contain these reports technical issues or refer to another file that describes this. For the technical requirements and software dependencies and stuff, these can be partly in the README or it can be in the facilitation guide. Up to you how you decide is the best location. We don't have any strict rules in the methodology, but we say that these stuff should be written somewhere and should be easily accessible to other people. So in README, what you need to provide is essential information, the purpose, the content, how to use the learning materials, offer basic instructions on how to customize and how to contribute so that others can understand the context and the scope, because this is the first file they will run into when they come to your materials. And then the code of conduct will tell other people how to contribute to your learning materials. So come to you as another external author of the learning materials in an inclusive environment, respecting others. Now we are publishing, right? So the idea is to publish fair learning materials. So what is the most important thing when we are aiming for fair publishing of the learning resource? Is it the metadata? Is it the visual appealing module? Is it the catchy title? Is it the platform? Good, okay, most of you are on the right track. So you need to ensure that the metadata is open and it is accessible to all. It's good to make the module visually appealing, but this is more a marketing trick of how to get learners to come to it and to consume it and to use it and everything. From a fair point of view, if you remember what is the minimum fair, to make it findable, you need to provide the metadata openly accessible to all, no matter if the resource itself is not open and it costs money. So let's repeat one more time. Fair doesn't always imply free and fully open to everyone, okay? When we say fair, that means that the full metadata description is always going to be available to everyone, and there will be a clear description of the access rules, but the access rules might say this material is available only to this type of people, or to access this material, you need to register there and there and you to pay this and this amount of money, right? Because fair doesn't mean free and it doesn't mean fully open. But the metadata always has to be fully open and available to everyone. That's why we recommend that you keep it in this one syllabus file, all of the metadata, so that you can easily tell the repository where you're publishing or something, yes, this is the information that needs to be free, open for everyone. The rest of the stuff, you decide what's going to happen. You just need to describe the access rules. For an example, if you're working with closed material, that means that you define the access rules, who can access, under which conditions, and you will publish in closed repositories and in closed learning management systems. For example, not all of the training materials on Skills4EOSC are open to everyone. Some are open only to Skills4EOSC partners because these are internal trainings. Which action list contributes to making your module findable? We are now in the moment when we are publishing, so we need to make sure that we go through all of the FAIR stuff. Findable is the first thing. And you say, list contributes designing visually appealing graphics for the module. Of course, great job. So detailed table of contents helps. Submitting the module to relevant repositories helps. Using relevant keywords in the module description helps a lot. The visually appealing graphic will not help you make it more findable. It will help you make it more likable by learners, but not findable. What helps you make it findable is use a persistent identifier, create rich, standardized metadata, use a schema. Publish in repositories or open access platforms. Use the right keywords in title, description, or metadata. Remember, I told you these are the first things that are searched when you try to search for something. You want to make it easily findable for everyone. Promote it on social media, in networks. Integrate it in a learning management system with a big catalog because people are searching through the catalogs there and they will find it. Encourage collaboration, encourage external sharing. These are the stuff that are going to help you make it as findable as possible. When we talk about findable, one of the very important things was to have a persistent identifier for your learning resource. So that means that it's very, very important that you choose a stable URL, even better, a DOI or other type of persistent identifier for your learning module, for your learning resource. This will ensure that it remains accessible over time. This will help you be more easily cited and attributed because always the link will be the same. This will also help you with findability because now it will be in a repository that most probably also has a search engine. This will also help you with cross-platform compatibility and interoperability because of the standardized bits. This will help you with tracking impact and usage because now you can track how many times the repository was accessed. And of course, it is compliant with the FAIR principles. This is what we want. And when you're doing the bits things, you're also making sure that you use version control when you're publishing, right? For example, when you're publishing to Zenodo, you can have multiple versions with the same common bit. When I'm updating the learning resource, I will just get a sub bit for every version, and then I have a common bit for all of the versions of the learning resources, which is a great way how to keep track of all of the versions of the same learning resource. Now let's talk about interoperability. When you publish your module, which aspect is not directly related to interoperability? Is it file formats? Is it metadata? Is it the learning objectives? Or is it the accessibility on different devices? Yes, in this case, what is not directly related to interoperability is using smart learning objectives. These are more directly connected to findability because these are also part of the metadata, and these are going to be searchable when you use different types of keywords, but they don't really help you with interoperability, which doesn't mean that they are important. They are important, but for different principles in the whole FAIR thing. When we talk about interoperability, you need to use standardized formats, open file formats. When you integrate with learning management systems, try to use something like Form or XAPI or something like that, which is not directly related to that platform, but it is a more common thing, like the question that we had before and we were answering. Try to use as much as possible open APIs to integrate across platform like this XAPI, which is used in education. Make the content responsive from different devices. We said we should also test it for accessibility. And of course, ensure that the content is linked and it's referenced and everything so that it can be widely used and integrated with other things. Let's talk about reusable now. Now we want the action that least contributes to making your module reusable. Is it the license? Is it the instructor kit? Is it the attribution? Or is it hosting on a specific learning platform? Okay, you got confused a little bit here, but most of you are still correct. The idea is that least reusable is hosting the module on a specific learning platform. Because as someone mentioned in the question before, specific learning platforms are a bit closed, right? So that's why we say, okay, when you publish to a repository, publish for instructors, publish the editable file versions. Don't publish the final formats that you're putting on the learning platform, because these are not really reusable. To ensure reusability according to the FAIR principles is to have the license and to have clear attribution for anything that we reuse. And if you remember during design, I told you to make it even more reusable, it's very important that you provide this instructor kit. This really helps other people understand the context of your learning material. It will also help you, but it will help others a lot to really reuse what you created. So all of this stuff like modular design, open standards and formats, the flexible metadata, the possibility to adapt, the accessibility of the learning resources, the instructions for use, the easy access and sharing, the possibility for collaboration and feedback and everything are increasing your reusability. So minimum is license attribution. Everything else from this list that you do is additionally making your learning materials more reusable by others. Now, one of the things that is kind of important here, and we still don't really use it a lot for learning materials, is the machine readable metadata. We, at this point, many of the learning materials, they provide some kind of human readable metadata, but a very few are providing also machine readable metadata. And there are different ways how you can do this. For an example, in our case, what we do is in the syllabus, we provide the human readable metadata, but we also provide the machine readable metadata. We provide it in the head of the file. And when we provide it in the head of the file, it shows up as metadata in the HTML page that is produced from our Markdown. But we also use a technique which is called FAIR signposting. And this technique was developed by the FAIR Impact Project. And it actually helps increase the findability and the reusability of the resources by creating a link set that describes the resource and the links to the resource on the landing page of the learning material. So, for example, if you do a right click and do a view page source on this last link that is in the slide after, at some point, you will see that there is also a link set description of the learning resource with all of the information according to the FAIR signposting that helps machine engines understand, aha, this is the starting page, the landing page of a learning resource that contains these and these modules, that has this speed, these are the authors, this is the title, this is the information from the metadata, and so on and so forth. And this is something that we need to keep working on. So if it's possible for you, do it. If not, start thinking about how to implement it maybe in the future. The last stage, it's verify. At this point, we published. We have the bid, we have everything. The idea is to check, is everything okay, right? Now that we published, now that we have it available for other instructors, other learners, let's see if it's all working the way we envisioned in our heads. So you can use a checklist that we developed for checking for quality assurance. With this checklist, you can actually measure the level of fairness. Are you doing the minimum stuff? How much are you doing from the extra stuff? But we also recommend that you do external quality assessment. You make sure that you do quality assessment from the learner's point of view, and you make sure that you set up gathering the feedback and you have a mechanism in place that you will regularly check on the feedback and start the continuous improvement process. So when we say verify, you go through this list again and check, yes, okay, I have the metadata, I have it indexed, I checked for accessibility, I defined the rules, I used the schema, I used open file formats, I provided attribution for everything I reused, I provided a permissible license that allows the relations, and that's good. You have the minimum. Did you strive for more? Check with the self-check quality assurance guide that is provided by another task in Skills4EOSC. You can go to this link here and you will see different types of checklists that are focusing on different ways how you can do quality assessment of your learning materials. We don't have really time to go through all of the questions and see how they work right now in this training. It's very, very important that most of this stuff is done by someone who didn't develop the learning materials. Why? Because the people that were developing, they have this cognitive bias. You know, if I do a typo, I will never see my typo unless I have a spell checker on. But someone else, when they read my text, they will find my typo, right? So it's the same thing, but on a grander scale. So it's good that someone else tests, that you are not the one that is doing the quality assessment, because you will miss half of the things that are maybe problematic or need to be improved or something like that. Anything that is of high importance, so something is not working, something is not right, you should resolve it as soon as possible. But you always get a bunch of, well, this can be improved, but it's not very important at the moment or something, right? Gather this information. And then at some point you will start continuous improvement and you will decide, okay, let's implement this improvement or let's do this other improvements later on. Never forget to test quality assurance from the learner's point of view, right? So if it's for an example, learning management system, log in as a learner and see and go through the materials and see what they see, right? To ensure that they can access everything and that everything works as designed before they can actually use the content. So when we are talking about feedback, which method do you think is best for gathering feedback from learners after they consumed the learning content? So you gave them access, you advertised, you gave them access, they went through it, and now you ask them, okay, please tell us what you think about this learning content. And yes, of course, most of you are on the right track. You can use all of them. So you can use a survey, you can use a focus group, you can use usage statistics, and they give you different types of information, right? The focus group allows you for in-depth discussion. The quantitative data with usage statistics provide you an insight of the numbers, and the surveys can reach a much larger number of users that can potentially give you feedback. But which of the following you think is not a typical aspect of verifying the effectiveness of a learning module? So we are still in verifying. Which of these is not part of verifying? Is it collecting feedback, or is it analyzing the performance data, or tracking usage statistics, or promoting the module? Right, so promoting is not verifying. It is important from a marketing point of view, right? You want to reach as many people as possible, but it is not part of the verification process. You do it after publishing for different reasons, not for verifying, but for making sure that a wider audience has access to your learning materials. So when we talk about verifying, basically remember, you need to verify findability, accessibility, interoperability, reusability, but also verify it from the truly learning point of view, right? Validate the learning outcomes. Did you really reach your objective? Verify the quality and the accuracy of everything. Is it up to date? Does it sound right from a pedagogical aspect? Is it engaging with the learners and the educators? and make sure that it is sustainable over a longer period of time. So that's it. We went through all of the stages. We started from prepare. We ended up in verifying and making sure that we do have fair learning materials. But the journey is not over. Why? Because we said we continue in this loop, continuously improving the learning material. Because, you know, whatever we create, it's not perfect. It can always be improved. And we made sure in the methodology that we provide many different channels for feedback, like the survey, the focus group, the usage statistics. Now it's time to use these channels. So use the feedback you got from the learners. Use the recommendations from the external quality assessment. Use your self-reflection while you were doing the materials, while you were doing a training with these learning materials. Get external input like discussion forum, direct mail contact, reported issues, anything. Combine them together, analyze them, create a list of potential improvements, and then select the most important items of this list and say, okay, now let's do a new version. Let's do an improved version. And you continue doing this cycle over and over again in order to make sure that you get the best learning materials and they are up to date as time passes by and things are changing. So let's say that you are now in the continuous improvement process and you do this feedback analysis, and based on the analysis, you figure out that some of the researchers found the module too technical. Which action would be most appropriate for you while you're doing the continuous improvement? Is it to revise the module to simplify the language, or just ignore the feedback because, you know, some level of technical detail is necessary and you cannot avoid it? Or create a separate, more advanced version, or remove the technical content, even if it is essential. People are complaining, so they can live without it. What do you think? Okay, most of you are on the right track. Although it would be nice to ignore the feedback, please don't do that. Because if people are complaining, they have a problem. So it needs to be solved, right? You need to find a way how to address this problem. And sometimes creating a new version of the module can help. In this case, it doesn't help because it's even more advanced. So the best thing in this case would be to revise the module and simplify the language. And this year, it's actually going to help you even make it more accessible, because if you remember, one of the tips and tricks was to use a simple language to avoid these kinds of things. So try to use continuous improvement to make sure that your learning material always stays relevant, effective, and engaging over time. Respond to all of the learner needs that you get from the feedback. We, over time, try to incorporate new technologies and make sure it's always high quality. That's why we always have this verify in the end, because even if you make the change, you still need to verify again that it's fine. And you basically in this way try to enhance the learning outcomes and make sure that your approach is always adaptive and innovative and stable over time. So let's repeat one more time. This is just to check if you are listening to me very closely. Continuous improvement is not something we do one time just to say, yes, we improved our learning materials and that's it. We do it all the time. So all of the time on regular intervals. You decide the intervals, you can wait for a few improvements, then decide to do the another iteration. But try to define a regular interval where you will analyze and decide, are you going to start a new version and create an improved learning materials. In this way, you are implementing an iterative process. It improves your quality of the learning materials. It ensures that it's always up to date. It improves the learner engagement because you're reacting to their feedback, and enhances the whole learning process overall. So it's really, really helpful. While you're doing continuous improvement, ensure that you are using versioning, because now with every iteration, you will create a new version of the learning materials. You need to keep track of this. And that's why you need to decide on the versioning system that you're going to use and make sure that you use it in a consistent way. I mentioned to you before that we opted to use Git as the versioning system. So we use the version numbers inside Git in order to keep track of all of the releases of different versions that we do for the same learning material. This is how we decided to implement it. Again, it's not mandatory by the methodology. It's just something that we share with you as best practices that work for us. You can adapt it to your own context. For an example, we use this versioning with major, minor, and patch version, where we do a new version in major if we change the overall structure of the learning materials. We do a new version in minor if this is an incremental improvement based on gathered feedback in improved items. And we use the patch number to increase in the cases of only technical fixes, something that we missed and now we are fixing. You can figure out something else for yourself, but just be consistent and use your own versioning system. This is how we combine it with the so-called release notes, which are important from the learners and from the instructors' perspective, right? They see multiple versions. They want to know what is the difference between the versions. And this is how we describe, okay, in this version, we added this, and in this version, we updated that, and we changed this, and so on. So other people that want to reuse your material, they can track the different versions and know what are the differences between them. It's very nice from their point of view. With this, we are coming basically to the end of all of the activities that you should do if you're following the FAIR by Design methodology. I only have a bunch of links to share with you to help you on your journey of implementing the FAIR by Design methodology. All of the materials related to the FAIR by Design methodology are implemented using the FAIR by Design methodology. So you can use the links also as examples of learning materials that have been developed with the methodology. So there is the FAIR by Design book that describes the theoretical background of the methodology and the idea of the stages. Then there is the Trainer of Trainer course, which is available also on the Skills4EOSC learning management platform that tells you how to implement it practically using the tools that we chose. So Markdown with Git, HTML, and so on. And there are also the training Git pages, the micro-learning unit that gives you like a crash course on practical implementation of the methodology with different tools and so on. So you have quite a lot of materials that are here to try to help you. No wizard, I'm afraid, but if you put them all together, maybe you will get a quasi wizard to help you on your journey. The two last newest things that are added to these learning materials about the FAIR by Design methodology is the quick guide and the final recommendations that we just issued a month ago. You also have the links at the bottom are available on Zenodo, so you can use them to help you with the methodology. Before we go to the Q&A session, I really just want to emphasize one thing. The methodology itself, it's built on a collaborative environment, right? That's why we talk about feedback and collaboration and code of conduct so much and so forth. This is how we also develop the methodology itself. So we try to gather as much feedback as possible from people that have heard about the methodology, try to use the methodology and everything, and we incorporate this feedback into the new versions of the materials. So if you have any idea, any suggestion, anything you like or you don't like, or anything at all, please use this CC survey link here when you get the materials and fill out the feedback form for the FAIR by Design methodology and tell us how we can improve. We regularly check the answers and we implement this continuous improvement on the methodology itself. I hope you enjoyed all of this so far. We are at the very end. So now we can move on to a Q&A and I can go back to the chat and go through some questions. Let's see, I think I will stop sharing at this point because we don't need the slides anymore. And let me go through the questions and see what's happening. Okay. I'm just looking at two new ones. Or...
Yeah, only two new ones.
Okay, I would also include accessibility to internet. Options to download and use it on a local computer. Yes, because I think we mentioned this somewhere in the accessibility later on. It is recommended based on the accessibility tips and tricks that people should be able to download offline the content to consume it, because not all people have, for an example, stable internet connection, for example, in Africa or something. So yes, it's a tip and trick. How would you create a code of conduct for each content set, or just general for the full sharing platform? So in our case, the code of conduct is created for each learning object, each learning resource. Okay, it is in this code of conduct file that comes with each package. So you can have a different code of conduct for a different package of a different learning object. It's up to you. We use the same one for our learning materials that we produce because we want to keep the same rules, but you don't have to. So the idea is that you define the code of conduct for this package of learning materials, and it will be used for this package alone. If you want to have a separate code of conduct on pieces of the learning material, then best to divide these pieces into separate packages and publish them separately because they have different rules of play. Very useful, great. I'm so happy. I hope half of you didn't fall asleep. I would love to see an integration of the care principles as well. Okay, great. That's something that we can look into, see how we can further add steroids to our methodology. This time it will be here. Yeah, that's a great idea. Is there support material? Yes, there is support material. So there is a link on FAIR-side posting on the slide where it is. Go to the link and it will take you to the definition of the FAIR-side posting, and there are additional links there how you can implement it. And we had quite a great collaboration with FAIR Impact. They helped us implement and verify the implementation of a FAIR-side posting, so they are quite open to collaboration. Where can we learn about the HTML metadata needed? Okay, basically, you can, first, what you can do is do this right-click view page source, as I gave you the instruction in the slide, and you will see, I mean, it's just two fields. So the first field in the HTML head is meta, and then you have the name of the field and the value. And then the second thing is this FAIR sign posting with link set. So you will have the example there, and I think it will be much more clear to you what we are talking about. But basically, you just need a person that is good at handling HTML source code, and they will know when you tell them, I want to add metadata to my HTML page, what you're talking about. I don't see here anything else. I don't know, Carol, on your side, did we cover everything or?
I think there are no more questions. I think it's okay. I mean, you can see that there's so many people thanking you for the presentation and like all the information, which it's great, and I just want to reproduce here as well. But yeah, I mean, but Sonja, can you share again the link to the slides? It's just because there's so many messages, and maybe it's just good to have it again here.
The link to the slides themselves. Just a sec. I will give you the link to the slides. Here.
And then we can just access all the links also provided in the slides, which are super useful.
Yes. Right now they are on GitHub because it's still, we are still in the verification phase. But let's say in a week from now on, they will also be on Zenodo. So you will be able to just search FAIR by Design ATRIUM on Zenodo and you will find it also there. Don't worry, we'll follow the methodology to the letter.
And also I strongly encourage people to use the link for the feedback, which is a very important part, right, for us.
Yes, yes. really use the EC survey form and give us feedback on the methodology. It's really important for us, okay? And we try to address everything. For an example, we just had a workshop on IDCC a few weeks back, and this is where I learned from the participants about this connection between the skill level, and the modalities of the learners. And this is something we already added in the methodology. So there was a slide there, and we are updating all the other content on this. And of course, there are so many aspects of developing learning materials. I mean, people are sometimes experts in one area of this. So when you try to put it all together, there is really so much to learn about it. It's really a process. I hope you can at least use some of this. I know it's a lot. I know that right now your head is full with so much information, and it needs some time to breathe and to process and everything. But I hope it helps. I hope at least it helps you a little bit to make it better, to make it at least minimum fair, and then strive for more. You know, it's an iterative approach. So first approach, try minimum, and then go for and this part, and this part, and this part. I will be extremely happy. I am not asking for more.
Yeah, just like, I think just people waiting for the link.
Yes, Fuji also gives a fairness score. Yeah. All of these, it's not just Fuji, there are a couple of tools. I didn't give you the links intentionally because they are, the way they are developed, they are really for something else, not for learning materials. And I'm hoping that they're not really working 100% okay on learning materials. But I hope that in the future, this part will also be integrated and they will be improved.
Just reinforcing what Sarah has just said now. So it's important to, Sarah, please.
Yeah, yes. No, I take this opportunity because just yesterday we launched the communication around our final conference. So it would be very nice to meet you in Paris, the 11th of June. And there you can find also the registration form because the seats are limited. And so, yeah, if you want to join us, do this. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sonja. Thank you very much, Carol. It was really a very, very nice workshop. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for this information. Yes, if you can join us, please come to Paris and be with us at the end of June. Yes, I think the only thing is missing before we close. I think people are really anxious for the link, and now here it is. We have the link, so please, and again, I will ask you again to take time to use the feedback form and give us more information how we can improve it and make it even better. I do hope to see you more in other opportunities, or in Skills4EOSC or in ATRIUM. Skills are going to be ending in August this year. ATRIUM still has a bit more life. We're going to end at the end of 2027. But stay tuned with our social media, stay tuned with our activities, so we can be together in many more opportunities from now on. To my side, I just want to thank you, Sonja, and thank you, my colleagues, Amelia, Mega, and Claudio, Sarah, for organizing this. And I really hope to see you again very soon in other opportunities.
Thank you all. Bye. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.